Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the harsh reality of what it was like to be an American soldier in 1776. The year began with a glimmer of hope. The British had abandoned Boston, and we were winning, but that didn't mean anything for the guy with the musket on his shoulder. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up near Boston in early 1776. The good news, you're part of a cause that's stirring spirits across the land. The bad news, everything else. Your bed is likely a makeshift pile of straw in a crowded tent or a repurposed barn, and the air hangs thick with the smell of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and something you'd rather not identify. This is hardly the polished, disciplined force you might imagine. A British officer, General John Burgoyne, has already dismissed the American soldiers as a rabble in arms, and honestly, looking around you might see why. Your comrades are a bewildering mix: farmers, artisans, and fishermen, clad in whatever homespun clothes they could throw together. They are unwashed, unshaven, with hair matted and beards long. There are young boys barely 15 and older men who've seen 60 or more years of hard living. You might even see free black men and Native Americans among the ranks, particularly in the Rhode Island regiments, proving themselves equally serviceable for fatigue and action. The food, surprisingly, isn't terrible, at least not yet. You can count on meat or fish most days, and fresh produce is available at low prices. But for every decent meal, there's the ever-present threat of disease. Camp fever, dysentery, and typhus sweep through the ranks, turning camps into breeding grounds for sickness and death. Latrines are often open pits, and too many men neglect to use them properly, leaving excrement scattered around the fields, a pernicious habit that contributes to the vile stench. Cleanliness is understood to be the killer of disease, but despite orders, washing clothes is considered women's work, and there aren't many women in the American camps. The army you've joined is largely untested, its officers often as ignorant of military life as the troops they lead. You hear stories of men being flogged or drummed out of camp for drunkenness or minor infractions, punishments Washington has ordered to bring order to this rabble. The change comes maddeningly slow. As a British ship surgeon noted, without New England rum, a New England army could not be kept together. He calculated men were consuming a bottle a day. Your arms are as varied as your comrades' costumes, mainly flintlock muskets and fowling pieces, some ancient. The problem is, many men use them any way they see fit, firing them off for fun and wasting precious powder, which is in short supply. Washington, newly in command, was reportedly stunned into silence for half an hour when told there was less than 10,000 pounds on hand, enough for only about 9 rounds per man. Supplies come mainly by clandestine shipments from Europe, a precarious lifeline across 3,000 miles of ocean. Part 2. The General's Burden. Boston, winter 1775. Congratulations, you've endured the stench and the sickness of camp life. The good news, the enemy is bottled up in Boston. The bad news, you are in a way too. Your army controls the land around Boston, but the British control the sea, supplying their troops and receiving reinforcements at will. Many an uneasy hour when all around me are wrapped in sleep, writes General George Washington on January 14, 1776. He's been in command for 6 months, having taken over the sprawling, spontaneous New England army that gathered after Lexington and Concord. Washington, a 43-year-old Virginian of commanding presence, is accustomed to respect, amiable and modest, but with a certain distance in manner. He had little prior military experience beyond frontier warfare and the disastrous Braddock campaign, yet Congress appointed him commander-in-chief, and he accepted the momentous duty. He quickly sets about organizing the army, which still has no flag or uniforms. He insists on discipline. New rules and regulations are read every morning after prayers. Yet despite the changes, the army remains largely composed of citizen soldiers, many unused to being told what to do every hour of the day. This puzzles Washington, who struggles with a mounting contempt for what he sees as the unaccountable kind of stupidity in the lower class of these people. However, Washington finds a few remarkable men. Nathaniel Greene, a 33-year-old Rhode Island foundryman, self-educated and a born leader, had never set foot on a battlefield before joining the army 6 months ago. He quickly becomes an object of confidence for Washington. Another is Colonel Henry Knox, a 25-year-old Boston bookseller, big, gregarious, and highly energetic. Knox, like Greene, is self-educated, reading all he can on gunnery and tactics. Meanwhile, the British had dispatched reinforcements and 3 of their best major generals, William Howe, John Burgoyne, and Henry Clinton. Howe, a member of Parliament, was convinced the insurgents were few compared to loyalists. War had come savagely at Breed's Hill and Bunker Hill. Bunker Hill was proclaimed a British victory, but His Majesty's forces suffered over 1,000 casualties in an appalling slaughter. As one observer acidly noted, a few more such victories would surely spell ruin for the victors. On the afternoon of October 26, 1775, King George III rode in royal splendor to Parliament to address the increasingly distressing issue of war in America. In an age that adored ritual and pageantry, it was a scene hardly to be improved upon. He declared America in rebellion and confirmed he would commit land and sea forces, including unnamed foreign mercenaries, sufficient to end it. Despite heartfelt opposition speeches, the votes in both houses overwhelmingly supported the king's stance. The debate in the Commons lasted until 4 in the morning. Part 3. Boston's Deliverance. Spring 1776. Congratulations! Winter has come, but with it opportunity. The good news: Colonel Henry Knox is on his way with cannon from Fort Ticonderoga. The bad news: the journey is brutal, his army is shrinking, and the British still seem to underestimate you. On November 21st, the first snow falls. Distress is reportedly extreme in Boston. The British are cutting trees and tearing down houses for firewood. Food is short, and smallpox rages. British deserters crossing the lines report the American army is tired, unpaid, lacks clothing, and longs for home. In mid-January, Washington writes one of his most forlorn letters, suffering sleepless nights, feeling few know the predicament they are in. He enumerates his troubles: little powder, no money, and only half his paper army fit for duty. He believes his inability to attack Boston led to this pass and considers it miraculous. The British are blind to his true state. He's downcast, wishing he'd taken his musket and entered the ranks or retired to a wigwam. Washington learns through undoubted intelligence the British are fitting out ships, likely for New York, a city of vast importance. On January 8th, Washington dispatches General Lee to New York to put the city in the best posture of defense. The bitter cold continues in Massachusetts. On February 16th, he convenes a council of war, urging a bold attempt on Boston. The council says no, but they agree to another plan: lure the enemy out to attack the Americans by fortifying Dorchester Heights. Howe had sworn he would sally forth if the Americans occupied Dorchester. Preparations are elaborate and mammoth. To divert the enemy and drown out noise, night artillery barrages are planned. On the crucial third night, March 4th, the roar is furious. General Thomas and 2,000 men move rapidly and silently across the Dorchester Causeway, shielded by hay bales. Hundreds of carts and wagons loaded with cannon from Ticonderoga follow. The night is unseasonably mild, perfectly beautiful, with a full moon, ideal conditions for working as if the hand of the Almighty were directing things. By first faint light before dawn, everything is ready, at least 20 cannon in place. It is an utterly phenomenal achievement. At daybreak, British commanders looking up at the heights can scarcely believe their eyes. Howe exclaims, "These fellows have done more work in one night than his army could do in 3 months." Their immediate cannonade proves useless. Their guns cannot elevate high enough. Howe must attack, but by nightfall, a storm rages with hail mixed with snow and sleet. Clearly no British assault will happen that night. The morning after the storm continues, and Howe calls off the attack, giving orders to prepare to evacuate Boston. In less than 48 hours, the town's security dissolves. Boston becomes a scene of utmost frenzy, every person striving to get out. Loyalists are in utmost distress. On St. Patrick's Day, Sunday, March 17th, the wind turns. At 4 in the morning, over 8,000 redcoats march through the dark streets. By 9, all are underway. 120 ships depart with over 11,000 people. Americans watch from shore, cheering, weeping. The siege was a stunning success. Washington bested Howe despite insufficient resources and inexperienced officers. He had no illusions about what lies ahead. The humiliation the British suffered could make them a more formidable foe. Part 4. The Fall of New York. Summer 1770. Congratulations, you've survived the siege of Boston. The good news, it was a pretty sharp skirmish and a victory. The bad news, you're headed to New York, a far greater challenge. For 2 weeks, the army marches through the untroubled countryside of New England, columns winding, showing the first faint signs of spring. Hurry is the order of the day. Washington arrives in New York April 13th and finds defenses only about half done. He worries exceedingly over disease and dissipations. New York is unlike Boston, bounded by navigable rivers, a harbor accommodating the largest fleet. Whoever commands the sea must command the town, General Lee noted earlier. Washington, however, expresses no misgivings, convinced he can defend the city. Loyalist sentiment is widespread in New York. 2/3 of property belongs to Tories. Washington, though struggling with New Englanders at Boston, here finds men from different colonies, compounding animosity and discord, fearing it could tear the army apart. He writes, "They have nothing but providence and unanimity to depend upon. Discipline is hardly improved among new troops." On June 29th, officers with telescopes see signals flying from Staten Island hills. The first British fleet ships appear within hours. Henry and Lucy Knox are at breakfast at number 1 Broadway when they see the fleet. Lucy is in abject terror. By sunset, over 100 enemy ships anchor in the bay. On July 2nd, the Continental Congress in Philadelphia votes to dissolve the connection with Great Britain. News reaches New York July 6th. Spontaneous celebrations erupt. A letter from John Hancock with a declaration arrives July 8th. On July 9th at 6 in the evening, Washington orders brigades onto commons and parade grounds to hear declaration read aloud. He hopes this event serves as fresh incentive. The exuberance is quickly dashed. On July 12th, in a surprise move, British ships Phoenix and Rose, with tenders, sail up the Hudson, demonstrating how indefensible New York is without sea power. Alarm guns sound, cannonballs slam into houses. Washington feels extreme distress at shrieks and cries of women and children running. Private Joseph Martin, 15, remembers enjoying the complete view, thinking the sound musical. American gun crews fire nearly 200 shots to no apparent effect. The British ships proceed upriver, anchoring 30 miles above the city, cutting off rebel supplies and rousing loyalists. On August 12th, the sea beyond Narrows fills with another 100 ships or more, bearing down on New York, a fleet so large it takes all day to come up harbor. Another 3,000 British troops and over 8,000 Hessians arrive. The total British armada is nearly 400 ships, the largest fleet ever seen in American waters. Over 32,000 troops landing on Staten Island. To Americans, they are colossal. Camp fever epidemic in summer heat. Vile water here sickens us all. Anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 men are sick. Washington's men daily diminishing. Washington's quandary. Where will British strike? How to apportion strength? He feels compelled to divide army, violating old rule of battle. Never divide force facing superior enemy. He splits the army, relying on the ability to move men over the East River. Part 5. The crushing defeat at Brooklyn. Congratulations, you're about to face the largest battle of the war, and it's not going well. The good news, some of your officers fight valiantly. The bad news, you are completely outmaneuvered and suffer a crushing defeat. On August 27, 1776, the Battle of Brooklyn or Long Island begins. British land on Long Island. By noon, 15,000 men and 40 artillery pieces landed smoothly. Cornwallis presses inland. Loyalist welcome is profusive. American affluence shows they grew rich at Britain's expense. Word reaches New York early, but Washington is misinformed about the size of the enemy force, 9,000. He concludes the landing is a feint, dispatches only 1,500 more troops to Brooklyn. Expectation of a larger strike at New York or up the Hudson persists. J.B.Z. Fitch's regiment marches to Brooklyn, told to halt and wait. Washington's general orders, August 23rd, confirm British ashore on Long Island, leaving no doubt of seriousness of moment. He appeals to pride, patriotism, love of liberty. Remember, you are free men fighting for blessings of liberty, that slavery will be your portion if you don't acquit yourselves like men. Washington, beset by second thoughts, reshuffles command at Brooklyn August 24th, putting Israel Putnam over Sullivan. Poor choice. Putnam lacks experience, temperament. Putnam and 6 battalions cross to Brooklyn next day, causing a stir. Washington is outraged at the disorder, lecturing Putnam that the distinction between a regulated army and a mob is discipline. The night of August 21st, a terrifying storm over New York, like a hurricane. Lightning falls in masses, houses burst into flame. 10 soldiers killed by a single flash. Before dawn, August 22nd, sky is clear, cloudless, roll of drums, British invasion of Long Island underway. Frigates, bomb catches swing loose, stand down Narrows to cover landing. At 5 Fave, Advance Corps 4,000 elite troops pushes off, packed aboard flatboats. Invasion force proceeds across 3 miles of water. By noon, a fully equipped army of 15,000 men, 40 artillery pieces, landed. More will follow. At 3:00 in the morning, August 27th, General Putnam is awakened, told the enemy is attacking on the right, near the Narrows. British Commander Grant occupies a tension on right with 300 troops. Americans flee. Putnam rushes Sterling's camp to order him to meet the enemy. Alarm guns sound, drums roll, troops fall out. Sterling's forces of 1,600 men include Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and Delaware battalions. Redcoats advance in regular order, colors flying, artillery in front. Sterling draws lines, offers battle, in true English taste. Americans stand it. Well, hold fire until 50 yards. British decline to come nearer. Twice British assault Parsons' troops on height. Twice American lines hold. Americans and British often have no idea what's happening. Americans not only ones running. British light infantry officer leading 30 men into thick American riflemen sees a third of his men fall, breaks for woods. More rebels spring up, fire from every direction. At 9 hows, signal guns crash. Suddenly Sullivan realizes the whole British army is coming from behind, surrounded on a plain beyond the ridge. Von Heister orders Hessians in motion. Sullivan pulls back. Vastly outnumbered Americans return fire with murderous effect. Officers on both sides fear men will be cut to pieces. Some fight back, wielding muskets like clubs, run through with bayonets. Some plead for mercy. Fear of the Hessian troops was indescribable. Left side of American line collapses. Thousands run, hundreds captured. Sullivan holds back, trying to see many to safety. Amazingly, most succeed. Sullivan is captured. Sterling is surrounded, determines not to surrender. By noon, the rout is over. Howe orders a halt. It was the first great battle of the Revolution. Over 40,000 men involved, fighting over 6 hours. For the Continental Army, it was a crushing defeat. "O dole, dole full," scrolled Chaplain Philip Fithian. To the British, it was a glorious day, cheap and complete victory. If a good bleeding can bring those Bible-faced Yankees to their senses, the fever of independency should soon abate. Washington later estimates 70 to 1,000 killed, captured, but actual losses were dreadful. 300 killed, over 1,000 captured. 3 generals, Sullivan, Sterling, Woodhull. Sullivan and Sterling are treated courteously, but accounts of bayoneting Americans are common. Stories of Hessians pinning Americans to trees. A letter by an unnamed British officer in the Massachusetts Spy describes readily surrendered Americans dispatched. Hessians and Highlanders gave no quarters, a head for most prisoners, horror. Held captive in overcrowded, unheated barns, shot sheds. In remaining hours after the guns are silent, Americans in Brooklyn defenses wait tensely for a British attack. Stragglers come into lines, bedraggled, wounded. Part 6. The Great Escape. Brooklyn, August 1776. Congratulations, you've survived a crushing defeat and a desperate night retreat. The good news, 9,000 men, equipment, and horses escaped without loss of life. The bad news, your army is battered, dispirited, and shrinking, and the enemy is still on the move. Morning of August 28th, the situation is critical at Brooklyn. Outsmarted, outfought, hemmed in, backs to East River. A change in wind could make escape impossible. Yet Washington orders more army from New York. Pennsylvania regiments, Glover's mass troops, 120 men march into Brooklyn entrenchments. The weather changes dramatically. Temperature drops 10 degrees. Cold, drenching downpour. The start of a northeastern storm. Riflemen are ordered to keep up fire. British fire back. Rain falls with uncommon torrent. Guns are wetted. Firing goes till evening. Storm and roar of guns continue into night. The storm is to Washington's advantage. The ill wind from the northeast is a stroke of good fortune. Howe's ships have no chance to get up, but for how long? Washington makes rounds on horseback in the rain, showing a calm presence, telling men cool but determined. His anger, torment, and despair are kept to himself. Sometime before noon, a momentous decision is made: retreat. Washington issues a secret, deceiving, urgent message to General Heath to round up all flatboats, sloops without delay, under the pretext that New Jersey battalions are coming to relieve others. Orders come at 7. Troops are told they are preparing for a night attack. Joseph Graydon with the Penn regiments thinks it desperate, almost suicidal. Several non-covetive wills are made. 9 troops with the least experience, the sick and wounded, start for the Brooklyn ferry landing. The thing was conducted with so much secrecy, neither subaltern nor privates knew the whole army crossing back to New York. Officers aren't even told. Graydon thinks the order for attack is extreme rashness, until it flashed upon my mind that a retreat was the object. First, troops at the ferry find the river rough. No boats can cross. They stand and wait. General McDougall sends a message: no retreat tonight with conditions. About 11 the wind dies down, shifts to the southwest. A small armada of boats manned by Glover's masked sailors and fishermen starts over the river from New York. Glover's men are crucial with extraordinary seamanship. They negotiate swift, contrary currents in the pitch dark. More troops are ordered to withdraw from the lines. Tedious was the operation through mud and mire. Wagon wheels are muffled with rags. Talking is forbidden, strictly enjoined not to speak or even cough. They move like specters. Washington rides to the ferry landing, takes charge. Hours pass. Worst fear: the British descend with superior force. About 2 in the morning, a cannon goes off. No explanation. Graydon speculates the gun discharged while spiking it. Still dark. Young officer, Major Alexander Scammell, rides through outer defenses, looking for Mifflin. He mistakenly tells Mifflin the boats are ready, and Washington is waiting. Mifflin orders his regiment to move out. Graydon remembers Washington exclaiming, "Good God, General Mifflin, I am afraid you have ruined us." Mifflin responds with some warmth, obeying Washington's orders by Scammell. They must turn back. They do, and had the good fortune to recover our stations without the enemy perceiving what was going forward. At the ferry, troops, supplies, and artillery are loaded aboard boats. Everyone works furiously. Some heavy cannon are left behind. Time is running out. Without the night curtain, escape is doomed. Incredibly, just at daybreak, a heavy fog settles over Brooklyn, concealing everything. The fog is so thick, a soldier could scarcely discern a man at 6 yards. At long last, Mifflin's rear guard troops are summoned. Major Tallmadge, with his regiment, is among the last, and he thinks he sees Washington on the ferry stairs, staying to the end. In less than an hour after the fog disperses, the enemy is visible on the shore. Left behind in a single night, 9,000 troops escaped across the river, not a life lost. Part 7. Retreat and Humiliation. New Jersey, winter 1776. Congratulations, you've escaped the trap at Brooklyn. The good news, you survived. The bad news, you were outsmarted, outfought, and suffered heavy losses, and the enemy is still pursuing. Friday, August 30th morning, to British astonishment, rebels evacuated all works on Brooklyn without a shot fired. The immediate British reaction is utter astonishment, cannot yet account for their precipitate retreat. The whole escaped. Some, including Grant, saw Americans made a daring, superbly executed move. Very ably effected retreat. Charles Steedman calls the retreat particularly glorious. Others, like Clinton, felt with Americans flying in panic, Howe had a chance to end the war. The successful evacuation cannot compensate for the losses. 1,000 plus prisoners, dead, wounded. The Battle of Brooklyn was a fiasco. Washington was indecisive, inept in his first command on a large field. He and his officers were made to look like fools. He failed to recognize whoever commands sea must command town. He ignored the warning to divide his army. Howe's decision not to continue the attack is a subject of speculation. He was no doubt remembering the cost of Bunker Hill and had no desire to squander lives on a frontal attack. British victory was total, or had the wind turned earlier, British Navy into East River, war and chances of independence long delayed, even ended. In remaining hours after the guns are silent, Americans in Brooklyn defenses wait tensely for a British attack. When news of the battle reaches London, it is a sensation. Victory is grand. Burke, Fox, and others in Parliament are downcast. Tories are jubilant. News to enliven our countenances. In Congress, defeat is spoken of privately. Unfortunate. Beginning, disaster, no panic. Newspapers emphasize Washington's daring retreat. Renewed confidence. The escape is a masterpiece. A maneuver reflects highest credit upon our commander-in-chief. One writer, Providence favored us. In New York, the gloom of defeat is heavy. The high spirits counted on to compensate for enemy advantages are gone. The army crossing the night from Brooklyn, August 30th, is a sorry sight. Filthy, bedraggled, numb, soaked, sick, emaciated. The army that was cheering is no more. General damp spread, overwhelmingly defeated. Hard day for us poor Yankees, Enoch Anderson summing up. The resounding victory wasn't decisive. The war wasn't ended. Washington's 9,000 troops survived to fight another day. Congratulations, you've escaped again, but lost a crucial fort. The good news, you gained a brilliant new advisor. The bad news, disobedience, desertion, and disease plague the army. For the first 24 hours in New York after the escape, nearly all collapsed in sleep, including the commander-in-chief. Not till Saturday, August 31st, Washington notifies Congress, entirely unfit to take pen in hand. Since Monday, scarce any out of lines. 48 hours proceeding hardly off horse, never closed eyes, much hurried in arranging new dispositions, will save extremity of concern for another letter. American soldiers are deserting as if leaving a sinking ship, 30, 40 at a time. Many are defecting to the enemy. Disobedience and theft are epidemic. Far from an army of heroes, a spirit of desertion, cowardice, plunder prevailed. Washington is discouraged, unhappy, but keeps up appearances. He tells John Hancock that war is no work of a day, must be carried on systematically. Good officers are mandatory. Only means to obtain them is establish permanent footing. He argues for an end to short-term enlistments and better pay for officers and soldiers. He believes dependence on militia is assuredly resting upon a broken staff. Fear in Congress, people of a standing army, is remote. The most atrocious offenses max out at 39 lashes, seldom laid on more. Washington is unaware, but Congress has acted on much he wanted, due to John Adams' enlistment for duration and new articles of war based on British, with stiffer punishments. Washington writes to Lund, Washington, September 30th, "Such is my situation. If I were to wish the bitterest curse to an enemy, I should put him in my stead." On October 9th, Hope's End, British ships proceed up the Hudson, forcing a passage beyond Forts Washington and Constitution, sailing straight through to a safe anchorage upriver. Washington observes the whole sorry scene. To our surprise and mortification, they ran through without the least difficulty. No end of labor, defense came to nothing. The British suffered 9 seamen killed, considerable damage. The day showed the Hudson was undeniably theirs. On October 12th, Howe's army set sail upstream in a very thick fog. They land at Throg's Neck, a peninsula on the map, more of an island at low tide. British advance over the causeway is checked by American riflemen. More British reinforcements land. Howe decides to re-embark, consuming 4 days, Tweedledum business. Howe moves with astonishing speed, landing at Pell's Point, mainland. Washington knows the Harlem Heights bastion is a trap. The army must withdraw, concentrate forces at safer ground, 18 miles north, White Plains. Sterling and Sullivan rejoin the army through prisoner exchanges. Congratulations, you're retreating, but the enemy is right behind you. The good news, you made it to White Plains. The bad news, Fort Washington is about to fall. At a council October 16th, the Fort Washington garrison is decided to be retained as long as possible. Washington, Lee, Heath, Sullivan, Sterling, Mifflin are present. Knox is also present. Only George Clinton dissents. All of York Island is finally evacuated, except for 1,000 men for Fort Washington. Officially, an alteration of our position, not a retreat. The trek is slow, difficult. Men haul wagons and cannon. Private Joseph Martin lugs a cast-iron kettle, size of a milk pail. Arms dislocated, puts it down. Another shoves it, and it rolls downhill. Only one that was rid of their iron bondage. The British advance cautiously, seldom more than a few miles a day, against little resistance. Probably Howe has no need to hurry. He doesn't expect to cut the rebel retreat, but hopes to maneuver Washington onto an open field for a decisive victory. At last, October 28th, Howe sends 13,000 redcoats and Hessians up the main road to White Plains. Washington avoids an open field fight, dug in on high ground. British artillery moves closer. Suddenly, one column wheels left toward Higher Hill on the American right, Chatterton's Hill, wooded slopes, open fields above. It dominates American lines. Washington orders more men to Chatterton's Hill. British Hessians ford the river. Hessians, part of a newly arrived 7,000, launch an uphill charge. Militia break, run. Haslet's Delawareans and Smallwood's Marylanders fight bravely, give way. The Battle of White Plains, Battle of Chatterton's Hill. British and Hessians carry the day. Cost over 250 casualties. 2 more days, armies wait. Watch. Determined on something decisive. Knox writes his brother. Night, November 3rd, American sentinels report rumbling enemy carriages. Next day, November 5th morning, to American surprise, the whole British army is in motion, heading southwest toward Hudson, King's Bridge. Congratulations, you've narrowly avoided disaster again. The good news, you're out of White Plains. The bad news, you've divided your army and a storm is gathering. Joseph Reed confides to his wife after council, too late for British movements of consequence, other than excursions into New Jersey, to revive loyalists. Washington doubts Howe will close the campaign without attempting something more. Almost certainly, Howe heads for New Jersey. Nearing the letter's close, Washington adds further worry. Expect the enemy will bend their force against Fort Washington and invest it immediately. Washington still exhausted, dispirited, to closest seems bewildered, indecisive. Reed having second thoughts about Washington's capacity, increasingly worried over Fort Washington. Washington dispatches Lee south from Cambridge to fortify New York, Hudson key to British strategy. Once again, Washington divides his army 4 ways. Greene maintains the same position on the river. with overall command of troops at Fort Washington. He's yet to fight a battle and is optimistic, convinced the fort can be held. He argues it keeps communications open, ties up British troops. Washington's letter to Greene from White Plains, November 8th. Inclined to think prudent abandon fort. Decision to Greene on the spot. Now on the spot, he can't decide. Let's decision be Greene's. Greene agrees. British picked up information from deserters about the state of things at Fort Washington. Plans, De Mont's account confirmation. Famously cautious William Howe supposedly never risks a frontal attack on a fortified position. Bunker Hill lesson. About to disprove the theory. Full agreement of commanders. Mackenzie total confidence in attack. Predicts as soon as Fort Washington taken, Howe moves on to New Jersey. November 12th, the day Washington crosses the Hudson, Howe's army is within 4 miles King's Bridge. Plan, 4-part assault. Hessians will have a major role. Plan unfolds. Midday November 15th, Howe sends Colonel James Patterson under white flag to deliver a message to American commander Colonel Mago at Fort Washington. This time an ultimatum: surrender fort or face annihilation. Mago responds at once in writing, "I am determined to defend this post to the very last extremity." Congratulations, you've lost Fort Washington. The good news, the war isn't over yet. The bad news, it's the most devastating blow of the campaign so far. When word of the ultimatum and Mago's answer reaches Fort Lee, Nathanael Greene dispatches a rider to Washington. Washington dashes back, arriving at Fort Lee nightfall. Greene and Putnam rode across the river to meet Mago. Washington follows in a small boat. Halfway across meets Greene, Putnam returning mid-river in the dark. Greene and Putnam give an encouraging report. Troops in high spirits would make a good defense. Being late at night, Washington says they return to Fort Lee. Early Saturday, November 16th, Washington with Greene, Putnam, Mercer again crosses Hudson to determine what was best to be done. Sound of heavy cannon carries over water. 4 generals scramble up steep slopes to crest near Morris House. All stood in a very awkward situation, Greene writes. Disposition made, enemy advancing, durst not make new disposition. Still couldn't see disaster, urged Washington to leave, go back. Greene volunteers to stay, Putnam and Mercer also. Washington thinks it best they all go. Assault from 3 directions. After prolonged pounding, 4,000 Hessians from the north, over a bridge at King's Bridge, led by Knyphausen. A force of British under Cornwallis and Highlanders strike east, crossing the Harlem River in flatboats. A third force, 3,000 British and Hessians, strikes from the south, led by Percy. By 10, Howe has committed 8,000 troops, nearly 4 times the defending force. Knyphausen's Hessians face the steepest terrain, a withering fire from VAMD, riflemen among the rocks. Ferocious fighting, Hessians are dauntless, scaling the rock slopes. At last on the hilltop, Raoul gives the word. All that are my grenadiers march forwards, drummers strike up march, hautboy players blue all alive, shouted hurrah mingled together. Other sides of the attack advanced. Some American defenders give little resistance, others fight tenaciously. Graydon commanded a company facing Percy's assault from the south. 1550 men, a single 18-lead cannon, held off 800 British. Courage wasn't enough. By 1, the defending force is driven inside the fort, scarcely room. An hour later, the Hessian commander, Knyphausen, demands surrender. Magot capitulates. At Fort Ewok, the entire garrison, 2,370 Americans, marches out and lays down arms. It is a humiliating, costly reverse. The surrender of Fort Washington is the most devastating blow. utter catastrophe. The loss of over 2,000 men and 146 cannon is immense. The army is rapidly disintegrating from sickness and desertions. Washington is said to have wept watching the tragedy unfold across the river, unlikely given his imperturbability, but surely he wept within his soul. Faced ruin before, never like this. To his brother Jack, he writes, wearied almost to death with retrograde motions, Nathaniel Greene is in anguish to Knox. Feel mad, vexed, sick, sorry. Never did I need consoling voice. Both Washington and Greene were badly mistaken. Greene's responsibility ceased with Washington's arrival November 13th. Washington never blamed himself, never openly blamed Greene. He said only he acted on the judgment of others, nor did he fire Greene. Undoubtedly thought less of the young general, still knew Greene's strengths. Weeks before, Greene demonstrated foresight, organization, recommended supply depots across New Jersey, the Army's retreat path. Washington agreed. Washington repays loyalty after bad decisions, his wisest decision ever. The only American hero to emerge from Fort Washington is Margaret Molly Corbin, who took her husband's place firing a cannon after he was killed. Usually unhurried William Howe makes his next move with hardly a pause. 3 nights later, he sends 4,000 British and Hessian troops under darkness across the Hudson to land upstream from Fort Lee. Led by Cornwallis, they scale the Palisades. Washington rushes to the scene from Hackensack, shouts orders to abandon the fort at once. Everything is left behind: guns, stores, tents, and breakfast cooking. Washington's army flees in haste down the road over the Hackensack River, farther into New Jersey. Congratulations, you've retreated across New Jersey. The good news, you're still alive. The bad news, your army is battered, dispirited, and shrinking rapidly. The retreat southward across New Jersey begins November 21st, headed for the Passaic River. The country is dead flat, no stone walls. Over the Passaic, they push on 20 miles to Newark. Heavy rains, narrow roads sloppy with mud, men in tatters, many without shoes, feet wrapped in rags. Washington rides at the rear of the column, a point remembered by James Monroe, an 18-year-old Virginia lieutenant. He saw him at the head of a small band near the enemy, his countenance and manner so firm, dignified, yet so modest. Monroe estimates Washington has at most 3,000 men. Washington sets his army on the road early morning, but gets off urgent requests to Lee at North Castle. And why? His worries and troubles are clear. Men are broken and dispirited. No tents, baggage, and trenching tools left behind at Fort Lee. Dared not risk contact with enemy, so must leave a very fine country open to their ravages. He urges Lee to cross the Hudson with his brigades, join forces before it's too late. The enlistments of 2,000 troops are up on December 1st, free to go. The same nightmare prospect faced at Boston a year before, but the misery is greater and morale suffering. The chance the army evaporates is real. Privately, Washington talks with Reed about the possibility of retreating to western Pennsylvania. Reed thinks if eastern Pennsylvania gives up, the rest of the state follows. Washington places his hand over his throat and remarks, "My neck does not feel as though it was made for a halter." He sends Reed to Burlington, NJ, to impress upon Governor Livingston the urgent need for reinforcements. The NJ militia is not turning out in numbers. General Mifflin is dispatched on a similar mission to Philadelphia to alert Congress to the critical state of affairs. The first report from Mifflin is bitterly disappointing. The Penions are divided and lethargic, slumbering under the shade of peace. From Reed, nothing. It rained heavily, November 22nd. The army reaches Newark. Rain falls that night and the next day. Sufferings endured are beyond description, with men without tents, exposed to cold rains. Samuel Webb, impossible to describe conditions. No lads ever showed greater activity retreating than we have, best fellows at business. The greatest importance of this retreat is the impression it made on Thomas Paine, author of Common Sense, who volunteered to aid Greene's staff. Greene loved literature, political philosophy, and liked the brilliant Paine. He called him Common Sense. Common Sense and Call snarl perpetually wrangling.